Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. And I'm really excited today because I get to share some information that's not so easily available to people in prison or people who have felony backgrounds and may want to travel to the country of Canada. There are some specific rules. So I really met a very impressive young woman who runs FWCanada.com. And I met her in San Diego, and I'd just like her to tell us a little bit about her background. So Marisa, welcome so much to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I want to thank you for spending time with our audience. Tell us a little bit about your firm, your practice, and where you're located.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. It's so nice to be here. I'm so happy to be doing this today and providing this kind of information. I am a Canadian immigration lawyer based in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and my specialty is helping Americans with criminal records travel to Canada. So a lot of my clients are people who just have very basic things on their record, who need to be able to travel to Canada for any purpose, for leisure purposes, vacation, people who have business up in Canada, people who have family up in Canada. There's all kinds of reasons why someone would cross the Canadian border. It's the largest border between two countries in the United States, a very friendly and peaceful border, except when it comes to dealing with, people who have something on their record that may prevent Canada from allowing them through. So I wanted today to talk to you about how they find out about you having a record, what you can do to try and increase your chances of success to be able to get across the border, and what the rules are so that your listeners and the people who are tuning in can learn some valuable information today.
Well, it certainly will be valuable because a lot of the people who are serving time in prison really don't have much clarity or insight about how their life is going to be restricted once they return to society. So of course, they have to rely on the complications or overcome the complications presented by their federal probation officer or their state probation officer. But something that they don't necessarily think about, particularly those who live close to the Canadian border and may want to travel to Canada to see their families, don't recognize or realize what complications are going to surface. So yeah, please tell us a little bit about why Canada or what the process is for somebody who wants to travel to Canada if he has a felony conviction.
Sure. So the first thing is that you need a passport to travel to Canada. It's a relatively new requirement. And I know that for some felonies, you may have your passport taken away, in which case you have to wait until your passport is reinstated to be able to go through the process of clearing this up with Canada to be able to get across the Canadian border. So first step is get the passport. Once you have a passport, then it's a question of how long ago you completed your sentence. So when they're looking at sentence completion, they're looking at everything, including probation. So the further you are out from your sentence, the more likely you are to be able to get into Canada. So a person who was just released yesterday and is still on probation has less of a chance than someone who served time, 15 years ago, completed their probation, is all, had everything taken care of, has their passport back, and hasn't had any problems since then. So that's the first thing that they're looking at, and that's unfortunately not something that we can control. Time just passes the way time passes. So,
what is the sweet spot? How much time should pass before somebody reaches out to even make this attempt?
Sure. So the first sweet spot, there's different sweet spots. The first sweet spot is 5 years following the completion of probation. Once it's been 5 years that you've been off of probation, you're actually eligible. Everybody is eligible for a process called criminal rehabilitation. It sounds scary. It sounds like something you have to check into. It's not. It's a paper application that gets submitted to a Canadian consulate in the United States who takes a look at your criminal record and says, is this person likely to reoffend if we let them into Canada? So they're also looking at not only how long has passed since the completion of your sentence, but they're also looking at what was it that you did. So for nonviolent offenders, you and I met at a white-collar crime seminar. So for the white-collar crime type of offenses, you do have a higher chance of being able to get into Canada, especially if you're no longer working in the same kind of area. If you've changed your life around, if you're no longer involved in that, then you do have a higher chance of being able to get in, because they say, well, you know, you're no longer working in that field. What are the chances that you're going to be able to do this again? Almost none. Okay, we're going to allow you to come to Canada. When it comes to other offenses, when it comes to drug offenses or offenses involving violence, it really depends on what else is on your record, how long has passed, can you show that you've been through counseling or programs or things that can really demonstrate that you have a different set of circumstances in your life, and what happened in the past is in the past and is unlikely to ever happen again. Once you go through this process called criminal rehabilitation, you're cleared forever so long as you don't reoffend. So if Canada says, okay, we took a look at what you did and we're satisfied that you're not going to reoffend, you can travel to Canada like any other American can, no restrictions, so long as you have your passport. And the only time that would be taken away from you is if there's a subsequent conviction.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
So I know you've represented a lot of people and helped them overcome this hurdle. What is an ideal candidate? What has he done that makes your job easier? What could he be doing to position himself so that if he wants to go to Canada and he's got a long-term time horizon, he says, "Okay, I'm going to put plant these seeds to make Marisa's job easier." Tell me what that person would do.
Sure. So there's things that we can't control. We can't control what the conviction is for, and we also can't control how long ago it happened. Some of the tips that I give to my clients, and I work with a lot of attorneys whose clients have plans to travel in the future, and I talk to them about what we can do in the short term. So on the legal side, what we can do is try and minimize probation. Because I told you that the sweet spot is 5 years from the completion of probation. If there's anything that you can do to reduce the amount of time on probation, getting credit for good behavior, that type of thing, that's definitely something that's going to help you because it actually moves up that time period. And that's one of the things that typically we can't control is how much time has passed. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that what the Canadian government really likes to see is letters from counselors or therapists or programs, completion, certificates of completion of certain programs like alcohol dependency or drug dependency or anger management type of classes that can really demonstrate that you have turned a corner and made some changes in your life and learned something about yourself and learned something about how to handle stress and how to handle bad situations so that you can demonstrate that it's very unlikely that you would ever find yourself in the same type of negative situation again. So we regularly ask our clients to give us letters from their counselors or certificates of completion of certain programs. So if you can get yourself into those programs, ace those programs, make a connection with the counselor or the person who's running the program, that would be excellent to help you down the road in applying to get your rights to travel to Canada back.
Well, one of the interesting points there that Marisa made for those who are listening who are going into the prison system is that she suggested you take some proactive efforts to advance the completion of your probation so that you're totally free. And the way that you do that, if you don't know, you really employ the same tactics that she just described that's going to make her job easier going to probation. If you want to get off probation early, I'm somebody who knows something about that. I mean, I had decades of that period of time shaved off of my sentence. And the way that I did it is it all began when I first went into the prison system. So if you're outside and you're listening to this on an iTunes and you're going into the prison system and you want to not only travel to Canada but advance liberty in every way in your life, the reality is you've got to start today. There's an old saying that says the best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And if you want to start positioning yourself for ever increasing levels of liberty when you come home, the reality is you've got to start thinking about, okay, these are the complications that I'm going to face. I'm going to have to entrust Marisa or her team to argue on my behalf, and I want to give her every bit of ammunition that I possibly can. So I do want to participate in programs, and I want to document the effort so that when she goes and advocates on your behalf, that she has the strongest possible case. She can't change the past. She can't control time, but she can absolutely argue on your behalf if you give her the tools that are necessary. Now, tell me about some of the challenges that you have faced in bringing people into Canada from the United States when they have a felony background.
Sure. So one of the things, like you were saying, just to reiterate and back you up, is that sometimes I have clients who, at the time they enter prison, they're very angry. They're not interested in participating in programs or doing any of those things. And sometimes what I have my clients do is way after the fact, have to go through a program again once they're out so that I can have that evidence. Because at the time they weren't thinking ahead in the future. They weren't thinking this is something that could possibly help me. They weren't thinking, what am I going to do now to make the best use of my time? And unfortunately, that means that we have to revisit all this in the future and send them to a program then, so that we can actually have that piece of paper, so that we can actually have that letter of support. So what you're saying is absolutely true. If you're going into it and you have the opportunity to address it now, this is going to save you a ton of headaches and a ton of revisiting this and pain and angst in the future, because you're going to have already done it. Some of the problems that we've had facing. So I'll give you like a client story that would be inspirational to your listeners.
Yeah.
So this is one actually of my favorite stories, because the story was so interesting to me. This was a really brilliant guy who graduated with a PhD in biochemistry. He graduated from university with a ton of student debt. It's like $250,000 worth of student debt, and he really didn't know how he was going to pay it off. There's limited job opportunities for chemists, and he was unfortunately solicited by a criminal organization to cook methamphetamine for them. So he agreed because he saw it as a way to, get himself out of this debt situation, and he was caught. He served some time in federal prison.
How much time did he serve?
So he actually made a deal with the prosecuting attorney, and he was able to provide them with some information that allowed him to get a lesser sentence, and he did 4 years in federal prison.
Okay.
They realized he wasn't the mastermind. He was the sort of nerd behind the chemistry, and they gave him a 4-year sentence with 5 years of probation. And he served all of that time. And what he did was, immediately from getting released from prison, he decided that he was going to start his own company. He realized that it was going to be difficult to get a position as a convicted felon. And he decided that, the best thing to do is to take matters into my own hands, and I'm going to start a petrochemical company, which he did. While he was serving probation, he met all the requirements, he did all the classes, he did all the counseling and consultations. And fast forward 20 years later, a Canadian company wanted to purchase that petrochemical company that he created upon being released from prison. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the company in Canada said, it's great that we have this company that we want to purchase, but we want you. You need to be able to come up to Canada and train our chemists and teach us how to, keep producing and maintaining the quality of the chemical products that we're creating. And he was just beside himself, because there was a huge amount of money on the table. This guy really, really turned his life around, and he had this tremendous opportunity, but he had this huge roadblock of not being able to get to Canada and not being able to, potentially have this deal go through. So he contacted me, and I was nervous. This was by far one of the most severe of the offenses that I had dealt with before at the time. It was several years ago, and in Canada, the sentence for producing or manufacturing narcotics is life in prison. So
really,
yeah, really. So
wow,
the maximum.
A lot of people in the United States have a misperception that Canada is much more tolerant or liberal and doesn't impose those types of sentences for crimes that don't involve violence. That's an inaccurate presumption then?
Well, not really. What we have in our criminal code is we have maximum sentences. Every single offense has a maximum sentence, and then what's actually imposed is a different story. So the maximum sentence for producing or manufacturing methamphetamine is life in prison, but that doesn't mean that everyone who does that is going to get life. A lot of the judges are a lot more lenient, and like this guy, someone who graduates with a PhD in biochemistry, doesn't have anything else on his record, probably not going to get life in prison.
And they also have a parole system there where they would reassess the individual as he served time, and if he's done well, they might give him some consideration. Is that accurate?
Right, that is accurate.
So I interrupted. You're going to continue
No
telling me.
problem, no problem. So just to go back to the process of getting him into Canada, one of the other things that they're looking at is they're looking at what is the maximum sentence in Canada. That's how they decide how bad the offense is for Canadian immigration purposes. So we're pretty much dealing with the worst type of offense. So an offense with life imprisonment, you can't get more than life. Like that's the maximum. So I was concerned that this person was not going to be able to get into Canada despite it having been 20 years ago, despite having gone through all the programs, and despite having this huge opportunity on the table. However, I was actually pleasantly surprised. We submitted a huge application, like really thick application, demonstrating all the benefits that this company would bring to Canada. Canada would now be able to have access to a company that would create these chemical compounds that weren't otherwise being created in Canada. And we actually got him first a temporary permit to be able to come back and forth during the negotiation of the deal. And once we demonstrated to the Canadian government that he was going through with the sale, the Canadian company signed a letter of intent to purchase the company, we actually got him cleared permanently, and now he comes up regularly to be able to support that Canadian venture that purchased his company.
Well, that's inspiring on a number of levels, because it shows the people who are listening that may be living without hope, that if they sow the right seeds, they prepare themselves well, they can reinvent themselves and enjoy a life of abundance when they come out. It doesn't happen by accident. It requires an awful lot of work. Of course, this individual is really highly educated, but on the Earning Freedom program, we feature a number of people who have reinvented themselves after imprisonment and become successful. How much time did this individual, we'd spoken earlier about 5 years. How much time had passed when this individual approached you? How long? It
was a long time. It was about 20 years.
Oh, so he'd had 20 years of successful life behind him before he approached you.
Well, probably 15 years of 15 years since being released, and then 20 years since being released, and then 15 years since release from probation.
I see. And have you ever faced situations where you've been able to overcome, if people want to get to Canada sooner, even on a temporary basis? Can you tell us about those,
Sure.
a story like that?
Sure. So we said that the magic number is 5 years from completion of sentence. Mm-hmm. Some people have to be in Canada well before that. For a number of reasons. I had a client that his situation was he was convicted of stealing a car, mm-hmm. Grand theft auto, and it was his uncle's car. There was a whole bunch of considerations going on in that case, but he basically was convicted. He served some time, and then he ended up leaving the state. He left the state and failed to report to his probation officer and failed to pay off the full amount of fines that were imposed on him that he had to do post his conviction. He then met a Canadian woman who came down to the United States. They, hung out. They were seeing each other for a long time, and she had to go back to Canada. She goes back to Canada and informs him that she's pregnant with his child. So now, we have a guy who never completed his probation or paid his fines. So for Canadian purposes, that 5-year clock has not even started ticking. And we have a Canadian woman who's about to give birth to a Canadian child, because since the mother is Canadian, the child is going to be Canadian. And I have this client stuck at the Canadian border with an officer who says, "I'm sorry, sir, you never paid your fines and you never completed your probation, and I'm not letting you into Canada." So for him, we had to do a temporary resident permit, which is a permit that allows you to temporarily have access to Canada for a specific reason. So for this guy, we said he wants to be there for the birth of his child and for the first 3 months to be able to provide support to his girlfriend and to the child. And it was a big deal, again, because grand theft auto in Canada is a serious offense as well. It's not as serious. It's not life imprisonment, but it has a pretty serious sentence. And the officer, when the guy just showed up without any applications for anything, didn't want to let him in. In the end, what they ended up doing is, in some cases, an officer will make a decision. They'll either say, no, I'm not letting you in, and they'll turn you around back to the United States, or they can issue you a permit and allow you to come into Canada. But the third option is they could also send you before a judge, and they can let the judge decide. So sometimes in difficult situations like this one, because it was a serious offense, but there was also a really good reason to allow him into Canada, they had the judge decide. So we prepared this package for the judge explaining the benefit to the Canadian citizen, the benefit to his girlfriend, and the benefit to the child, really, to have his father there. And the judge agreed with us, and the judge gave him 1 year to be in Canada to provide support to this person, but he made the condition that he had to take care of his fines, and he had to fix the probation situation back in the state where the conviction occurred before he would give him any more time. So this guy now was given a good opportunity. He was able to be here for the birth of his child, but that Canadian judge said, hey, you better go back to the state that you were from and complete the conditions. Otherwise, this is going to be the end of the line, and we're not going to do another temporary permit.
Well, thank you so much. We're talking with Marisa Feil of at FWCanada.com, and she is an attorney who specializes in helping people with felony convictions or criminal convictions cross the border into Canada. I know that you're very busy. I just have two quick questions for you. One of them is, what is actually the process when you'd spoken about he was going across the border and there was an officer there and the officer was questioning him? Could you just give us a quick glimpse of process? And then my follow-up question is going to be for people who do, like this individual who fell in love with a Canadian and they want to go to Canada. I'd like to just hear a little bit about how you, if there's something different, if there's that family situation, maybe they get married. So just those, first of all, what is the process of going to Canada? It's been a long time since I've been there.
Absolutely. So the way that it works is, what I first said is that you need a passport to be able to cross the Canadian border. When you come up to the Canadian border, either the border by the land border, or if you fly into Canada and land in Canada, or if you take a cruise ship from Seattle and land in Vancouver, you end up at a Canadian border where you present a passport. As a result of 9/11, the Canadian and US governments share information. So using your US passport, the Canadian border official can actually see what is on your record with the FBI. So they scan your passport, put it up to this little machine, and then it pops up everything that's in your past going back to your 18th birthday. So they don't do it to everyone. Sometimes they just look at the passport, look at your face, say, oh, looks like the same guy, have a nice day. But increasingly, they are doing these scans because they're concerned about security and terrorism and that type of thing. Also, if you fly up to Canada, your name is going to be on a passenger manifest. So that gets sent up to the border before you go, and sometimes they run that same list through the database, and they know that you're getting off the flight and that you had something in your passport.
Is it a crime if somebody attempts to enter Canada without going through the appropriate procedures in advance?
Technically, if you know that you need to go through procedures and you don't, then that can be considered an offense, and they could bar you from trying to come to Canada for a certain period of time going forward. Usually, people who show up at the border are just ignorant of the requirements, and so they don't usually impose that on people. They understand that this is not something that's super well known, but now that you have me on your show, all your listeners do know, and so they shouldn't be showing up at the Canadian
Make sure you
border.
contact Marisa Feil at FWCanada.com before you make that effort.
Yes. So if you show up there and you don't have anything, they're likely to say, I'm sorry, you have to turn around and go back to the United States. Come back when you have all of the paperwork properly filled out and you can demonstrate to us there's some compelling reason for us to accept this application. The other option is, if you don't want to go up to the Canadian border, you can do this all via mail through the Canadian consulate, and that's how we do it for our clients. We file everything at the consulate because that makes travel at the border a lot easier in the future. They'll have everything in the database. They can pull everything up, and it will show all the steps that you've taken, all the documentation that you've submitted, and that's really the best way of going about that. To your second question about being married to a Canadian or being in a relationship with a Canadian, they look at any reason for travel to Canada. And their definition is there a significant benefit to a Canadian? So they want to keep families together. If you are married to a Canadian, yes, you do have a stronger chance of success of getting one of these permits versus someone who just met someone online and is going to meet them for the first time, for example. But it doesn't just overcome the inadmissibility issue. So you can't just say, well, I've just been released from prison and I'm marrying a Canadian, so I'm definitely going to get through. You still have to consider all the other things that we talked about, the time, what was the conviction for, what have you done to show that, this is unlikely to ever happen again. And so the marriage to a Canadian becomes one of the factors that's considered when evaluating these types of requests.
Okay. Well, how do you market your services? How do people in the United States find you? I'm going to do the best that I can. I will absolutely link to FWCanada.com and your email address. So anybody who wants to connect them for Earning Freedom can just simply click on the link. But how are people finding you here in the United States?
So there's pretty much two ways, either through their local attorney. We do a lot of seminars in the United States, criminal defense attorney seminars, where we talk about this issue as one of the collateral consequences of receiving a conviction. So there are increasingly larger numbers of attorneys in the US who can speak a little bit at least about this issue, and then who can refer you to me if this is something that you want to proceed with. We also do a ton of free information. Our website specifically about travel to Canada after a conviction is called DUI Canada Entry, because most of our clients are refused entry to Canada as a result of a DUI.
That's DUICanadaEntry.com?
.com, exactly. And there are some videos on there. There are some infographics. We try and make the information easy to digest, easy to understand, and we offer free consultations on there. There's some information that you fill out about what you were convicted of and how long ago it was, and we get back to every single person with a free consultation to explain what their options are, what they can do to help themselves in the future. And I really invite all of your listeners to come and get one of those free consultations, because if not for now, maybe for the future, this would be something that would be able to help them out.
And do you have, besides your website at fwcanada.com and DUICanadaEntry.com, do you have a social media account that should link to?
We do. Everything is at FW Canada. So we have Twitter at FW Canada. We have YouTube at FW Canada, we have Facebook at FW Canada, and we are monitoring all of our social media accounts so that no matter how you want to get in touch with us, we're there to help.
Well, I'm going to do my best to provide those who listen to the Earning Freedom or Success After Prison with the contact information, so anybody who wants to travel to Canada can reach out to you. And what is your email address so that I can plug that as well?
The best thing to email us is info at fwcanada.com. That's frankwatercanada.com. And that way somebody in my office, if it's not me, I have excellent colleagues that I work with, someone will get back to you within 24 hours.
Well, Marisa, thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm really grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule. I know you had some calls, and I hope that we didn't cause you to miss any.
Not at all.
Really appreciate your expertise, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.